mission of the youth ministry here at First Evangelical Free Church. I have this written out. It's in every email I send out. I make sure it's repeated at least once every year in the presence of parents, that our ministry exists to come alongside you, the parents, here at First E Free in discipling your junior high and senior high age students. We do this in a number of ways. We do this as we call the young people to be lifelong disciples of Jesus and dedicated members of his church. More specifically, we do this as we provide consistent and relevant Bible teaching. We do this in the midst of relationships with more mature disciples within the church. We set up effective service and outreach opportunities for the students to be a part of. And we do have fun community building times together. So that's what we do. That's our mission, that's our vision as a youth ministry, to come alongside you, the parents, right? God's plan for discipleship through the Old Testament and the New Testament. God's plan for the discipleship is centered on the family. It's centered on these older generations teaching the younger generations. And there's no better context for passing on the faith than families. Parents, you are important. You may not have the great Greek and Hebrew knowledge that Pastor Randy has, but you are in a better place, a more frontline place for discipleship of your students than he is, than I am, than any of the pastors are, right? God's plan for discipleship is within the family. But God has also created a family that goes beyond a mom and dad and a brother and a sister and grandma and grandpa. He's created the church. And so we are a part of that. We, the pastors and the rest of the church, are a part of the discipleship. But we're not the main thing. We want to come alongside. So because of that, my main goal is to be equipping and supporting you as the parents. So this is why communication is actually going to be really, really important. I'm sending out an email every week. If you're not getting that, let me know. Check your spam folder. Make sure you're getting an email. Sometimes it's really basic information, but it's important to stay connected. Also, expect phone calls throughout the year, at least a few times, 2, 3, 4 times. Expect me to call you, whether it's mom or dad I get a hold of, but expect me to just be having personal conversations with you, with your family. I want to know how things are going. I want to make sure that we're connected, that what's happening here when we do gather isn't completely disconnected from what's happening at home. I want there to be a channel of communication. And always, obviously, feel free to email me, to call me, whether it's on my cell phone or at the office here at church. You can send me texts if you have my number, if you need to ask. My wife's also very available. She's busy with the kids and teaching. But don't hesitate to call her, to connect with her if for some reason that she would be a better point. We want to stay in clear and consistent communication and just keeping you up to date, keeping you in the loop of what's going on. We have an Instagram account. I try not to do too much social media. We do have an Instagram account. It's at FEFC _Youth Ministry. And you can just stay up to date with what we've got going on through there. We've got our church's YouTube channel. If you're watching this video, you clearly know where that is at. So communication is clear, both directions. I love that my job is not to stand in your place as a parent, but to come alongside. And certainly that does look like leading Bible studies and teaching and, having discipleship that comes from myself and from other leaders and from other students. But this is all in support of what you are doing as the front lines, as the general of this battle for discipleship. So it's also important that you know what are the other pillars. When I say discipleship, that can be like, okay, we're all going to be disciples of Jesus. What does that mean? We have some pillars here in the youth ministry that help communicate what do we mean by discipleship. One of those pillars, I'd say we have 5, is connecting with parents, that we're partnering with you. That's one of our pillars. We already talked about that. But we also have gospel centrality. Our job or our goal is not to just pile up biblical knowledge, but to know what the whole Scripture points to. God's plan of salvation in Jesus. The gospel is not just the entry point that someone needs so they can get the prospects of hell off the table, like phew, they've got the fire insurance gospel, now they can move on to other things. No, the gospel is central. It's the message we receive at the beginning. It's the message we're standing in right now that helps us stand firm. It's how we're going to be saved throughout our entire life. It's how we grow. You never leave the gospel behind. And so we want to make sure we understand what it is, understand the depths of the gospel, understand how it relates to every single part of life. Gospel centrality is one of our key pillars. But just because we want gospel centrality doesn't mean we're shallow. We also mean we want theological depth, right? Having the gospel at the center doesn't mean it's the only thing that there is to talk about. We want theological depth through biblical teaching, right? Your students are learning some heady things at school. By the time they're done with high school, they're learning things like calculus and biology and chemistry and all sorts of advanced things. And if we keep Bible teaching to some little inspirational platitudes, then can we blame them for kind of kicking their faith to the side, seeing it as like intellectually just irrelevant as they move on in life? But the Bible's deep. The Bible is the deepest book there is. If we want to immerse our students in it, then we need to go deep. So we don't hesitate to teach the Bible. We're going to be going through the book of Ephesians this fall, and you cannot step into Ephesians without getting in the deep end. It is a deep and weighty book that's talking about cosmic principalities and powers, and there's long, complex sentences and arguments. We're going to go there with 6th graders, 7th graders, on up through 12th graders, right? We're not afraid to do this. The world is always bombarding us with a different narrative than Scripture gives us, a different understanding of the world than Scripture gives us. That's what the world's constantly bombarding us with. If we want to be able to stand firm in the joyful and beautiful truth and joyful and beautiful orthodoxy, we need to teach it. We need to kind of work through this complex thing we call biblical truth. So we don't shy away from that. Biblical depth, theological depth. Our discipleship also is relational. It happens because we're not just about information transfer, right? As if you can kind of load all this theological depth onto a floppy disk and then just kind of transfer it over to another hard drive of another person. Discipleship, for as much knowledge as it involves, is also a calling into a relationship. It's primarily a relationship with God through Christ, but he uses other people. He equips other people to be the ones we call to be disciple makers. Other disciples are made into disciple makers. It happens through modeling, encouragement, getting to know, so it's relational. Your discipleship of your children is relational. And as we come alongside you, it happens through more and more relationships, whether it's older students with younger students, whether it's the leaders and the students, just friendships. It's always relational, so that's another key. And we also are all about intergenerational integration. That means that I don't want this youth room to be the only part of the church that your students or your kids are familiar with. I don't want them only to be known and to know other people who are within 2 or 3 years of their own age within this church. I want them connected. I want them serving. I want them contributors in this church. God has given them gifts, and as his Spirit works in them, he's equipping them to be a part of this beautiful family that God has created called the church. So I often am sharing different ways that they can serve, and I'm also trying to set up different ways in which others in the church can get to know them. That's what this Pray For Me campaign that we have going on this year, and hopefully many years down the road, is all about. I want your students to be connected and not isolated from the rest of the church. So those are our 5 pillars of ministry, right? Gospel centrality, theological depth through biblical teaching, relational discipleship, partnership with you as parents, and intergenerational integration. If you have any questions about this or want to follow up about it, just let me know. Thank you.